Two Texas officers, Collins and Ramirez, vanished on patrol one night in 2015. Their cruiser found empty, radios silent, no trace of struggle. For years, it was just another cold case on a lonely stretch of highway. But when their missing body cams were finally recovered, what they captured stunned everyone. The footage didn't show an accident or a roadside ambush. It showed the officers doing their jobs, calling out commands, and then facing something, or someone, that pushed them to the edge of terror. Their last moments, raw and unfiltered, became one of the most chilling mysteries law enforcement has ever seen. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. The empty highway. The Texas highway stretched out like a ribbon of black glass, glistening faintly under a thin sliver of moonlight. It was the kind of road that seemed endless, the kind where headlights disappeared into a horizon that never gave anything back. Out here in 2015, two patrol officers began what looked like just another long, quiet night. The older of the two, Officer Ramirez, adjusted his seatbelt with a weary sigh. He had worked this stretch for nearly a decade and knew every crack in the asphalt, every faded mile marker. His partner, Officer Collins, younger and still carrying that restless energy of proving himself, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel as the radio hummed with static, the kind of sound that always made you feel like someone was on the other end, listening but never answering. To the people in the nearby town, these men were familiar faces, steady, dependable, always the ones rolling through late-night diners for bad coffee. Folks noticed when their cruiser didn't show up at its usual checkpoints. By morning, the town would whisper about the patrol car that was found empty, doors open, engine still warm, headlights bleeding weakly into the dark. But in the beginning, it was just another night. Ramirez tilted his head toward his partner, muttering something about the emptiness of the highway. "Quiet nights are the dangerous ones," he always said. Collins laughed, brushing it off, but his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. He tugged his jacket tighter, as if even in the humid Texas night, a chill had found him. The two men drove slow, scanning shoulders of the road the way cops do, not expecting anything, but ready all the same. They checked plates, pulled over a trucker to remind him about a broken taillight, exchanged a half-hearted joke about paperwork. Small things, human things. All of it felt so ordinary, almost boring. But the strange part, the part that unsettled the deputies at the sheriff's office years later, was what came next on the body cams. For the first 30 minutes, the footage showed nothing more than routine patrol. A lonely road, two tired men, an engine's low hum. Yet in the stillness, there were signs. A pair of headlights glowed faintly in the rearview mirror, keeping distance. Whenever the cruiser slowed, the lights slowed too. When they pulled into a rest stop to stretch their legs, the lights faded into the dark, as if swallowed whole. Collins adjusted his holster nervously, whispering a joke under his breath. But Ramirez didn't laugh this time. He watched those headlights vanish like smoke, muttering, "That's not normal." Back in town, the next morning, the gossip started. An older woman at the diner leaned across her booth, whispering to a neighbor, "Ramirez was too careful to just vanish. You ask me, somebody wanted them gone." Another shook his head, stirring his coffee. Or maybe they saw something they weren't supposed to. You know how this highway's been for years. People traded theories the way others trade coins, quiet and uneasy, never loud enough for comfort. The abandoned cruiser had become more than evidence. It was a symbol of fear. And the strangest detail? When the deputies on the morning shift arrived at the scene, they said the cruiser's headlights were still on, the beam cutting into the morning fog. The front doors stood open wide, radios buzzing with static, but not a single scuff mark, no sign of struggle. Just silence, no bodies, no footprints, no sign of where the two officers went when they stepped out into the night. The official search began within hours. Dogs brought in, helicopters sweeping over miles of desert scrub. But nothing turned up. No blood, no dropped weapon, no torn fabric. It was as if the men had walked straight off the edge of the world. For 5 long years, the families lived with unanswered questions. The department quietly shelved the case, calling it an unsolved disappearance. But whispers about those headlights never faded. Folks in town swore that stretch of highway was cursed, that you could feel eyes on your back if you drove it after midnight. The footage surfaces. And then, 5 years later, in a dusty evidence locker no one had touched in years, the body cams surfaced. 5 years is long enough for departments to change boxes of files, for evidence rooms to pile up with cold cases. It's long enough for people to nod and say, "Time heals," and long enough for grief to harden into a quiet that lives behind curtained windows. But it's not long enough for answers to disappear forever. The body cameras turned up the way small, terrible things often do, by accident. A logistics clerk, cataloging old gear before a move, found a sealed evidence locker tucked behind stacked cold case folders. The seal was brittle with dust, the label faded. Case 2015, unresolved property. Inside were 2 body cams, each with a slot marked by a date. They weren't supposed to be there, forgotten. They were supposed to have been archived, watched, and filed. No one knew how they slipped through. When the footage was pulled and converted, the first minutes felt almost banal. The older officer, Ramirez, smoked facing the dash, the lighter's little flame washing his face. Collins double-checked straps, rolled his shoulders, said something about a barbecue he'd go to next weekend. Their voices were easy, familiar, the kind of banter colleagues use to keep the boredom at bay. The cams captured the small human things observers sometimes miss. Ramirez tapping a radio to life, Collins sketching a tired grin as he leaned toward the passers-by at a rest stop. They ran license plates, gave a courteous nod to a trucker, and warned a jogger about running too close to the road. At 1:12 a.m., they performed a routine stop, flashers on, approach made by the book. The cam recorded Collins' foot thud on gravel, the squeak of his boots, the rustle of paper as he flipped through a registration. Then the tape shifted tone. You could hear it in the breathing, a notch tighter, a hand finding its holster not in rehearsed reflex but with the quickness of someone adjusting to a new danger. The rear view showed headlights in the distance, 2 points that did not belong to any vehicle the officers had flagged earlier. They followed, like a shadow following a shadow. The footage grew sharper with tension. Ramirez's voice, calm but threaded now, said, "We got another set of eyes on us." Collins answered, quieter. "Probably tailing the truck. We'll check." The dashcam picked up the clink of Ramirez's coffee thermos falling into the cup holder. The small human noises that make you feel like you're in the car with them. Then the unexpected happened. As they stepped out into the night to confront what they thought was a routine tale, figures emerged along the road. Not walking like people, not running, moving in a way the camera could only call deliberate. The body cam on Ramirez showed faces shaded by hoods. Collins' cam, clipped at chest height, caught boots padding out of the dark, silhouettes that multiplied from one into many. There was a moment, a sliver, where the officer's training met the impossible. Ramirez barked orders. Collins shouted for IDs. The figures didn't answer. They advanced with a silence that didn't fit the human mouth. No voices at first, only the muffled pat of too many feet. What followed is the footage that made seasoned investigators sit very still. The cameras captured the scuffle, the jolt of impact, the frantic mic picking up gasps, shouts, and the raw sounds of a life being fought for. Collins' camera spun, lens catching boots, a glint of metal, and then a flash of motion so fast it blurred. Ramirez's audio recorded a strange undertone. Some people later said it sounded like chanting, low and rhythmical, or perhaps just the wind through a line of trees. Whatever it was, it threaded the violence and made the scene feel ritualized. The attack was brutal, not cinematic. It was close, messy in the way violence always is. Shoves, being overpowered, falling against cold metal. The cam showed both men struggling, calling for help, fighting to maintain control. Emergency radio calls crackled but were cut off. The last clear words were disjointed. One cam clattered to the gravel, recording only the echo of boots leaving, then nothing but static and the hum of the cruiser's engine winding down. When the footage ended, the screen went black. No bodies were visible in the final frames, only the abandoned cruiser, doors open, lights still on, and the 2 cameras lying in the dust like small mute witnesses. In the control room, the rawness of what they'd seen settled heavy. Detectives replayed the footage again and again, watching for details, faces, voices, cadence in the footsteps. A forensic audio specialist ran the background through filters, trying to discern whether that low sound was human voices or an artifact of the night. The town's old rumors, of strange people appearing on the highway, of drivers who never reached their destination, stopped being just stories and started to look like pattern. Outside, the diner burned coffee at the same rate, patrons whispering in low tones. "You saw the tape?" one asked. "It's like something out of a nightmare," answered another. A retired deputy scratched his temple and muttered, "No prints left, no tracks. They moved like they wanted to be unseen, but left the men gone." The footage didn't tell everything. It offered moments: a flashlight beam catching a hood, a voice too distorted to make out, and the terrifying reality that 2 trained officers had been ambushed by people who planned, who hit quickly, and who left no trace. The cams were proof that night was not a random danger, but a scene of deliberate, brutal action. They were proof that whoever had taken Ramirez and Collins had done it with intention. And the town, watching in stunned silence, realized the highway's stories weren't the product of folklore anymore. They were part of a real record, a reel of events that demanded answers. The moments of terror. The deeper the footage was studied, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an accident, not a roadside ambush in the ordinary sense. The body cams told a story that crept under your skin the more you rewatched them. It started innocently enough. The cruiser rolling down the Texas highway, asphalt stretching like a ribbon under pale headlights. You could hear Ramirez humming under his breath, that off-key tune officers use to keep awake on long night patrols. Collins tapped the steering wheel, joking about how his wife still complained he hadn't fixed the back porch light. These were men grounded in normal, everyday life, fathers, neighbors, colleagues. And that's exactly what made what followed so unbearable. At 1:22 a.m., the dash cam caught a set of faint orbs ahead, lights that didn't belong to any car. At first, they looked like reflections, maybe farm equipment or a truck parked crooked along the shoulder. Ramirez muttered, "That's odd," leaning forward as if squinting might force the highway to give up its secret. Collins eased off the accelerator, reaching for the spotlight control. The beam cut across the stretch of road, and there they were. 3 figures, standing motionless in the center lane. No flinch, no wave for help, no sign of distress. Just standing. The first body cam showed the officers exchanging a look, that half-second of unspoken dialogue seasoned partners share. Ramirez's hand brushed the radio mic. Collins whispered, "We flag 'em?" And Ramirez nodded. They pulled over, doors groaning in the quiet, boots crunching gravel. The cam microphones picked up the night sounds, cicadas buzzing, wind brushing the roadside brush. Then, in the space of a heartbeat, silence. The kind of silence that makes the hair on your arms rise because the natural chorus just stops. Ramirez called out, strong and official, "State police, identify yourselves." The figures didn't move. Collins' cam caught the beam of his flashlight landing on them, hoods pulled tight, faces shadowed, hands at their sides. They looked less like people caught on the road, and more like people waiting. Ramirez advanced cautiously, body language tense but controlled. Collins circled to the side, trying to get an angle. The cams shook slightly with each step, and that's when the first detail appeared. A small, deliberate sound in the background. A low rhythm, almost like boots scuffing in unison, or a chant too soft to catch words. The footage replayed in the station later showed how subtle it was, but in the moment, both men reacted. You could hear Collins' breathing shift, quickening. "Ramirez?" he said, voice a notch higher. The figures finally moved, not by stepping back, but by splitting. One sliding left, one right, the third staying still in the middle. Controlled, rehearsed, as if they'd done this before. The officers raised their voices, issuing commands. "Hands up, now!" The order cut through the air, but the response was chilling. Nothing. No hesitation. No panic. No sign of surrender. The middle figure tilted its head slightly, the gesture almost curious, like someone studying them. Then the sound came, clearer this time. Not a shout, not words, but a murmur layered on itself, multiple tones weaving together. Collins swore under his breath, tightening his grip on the flashlight. Ramirez took one step closer, trying to break the spell with authority. That's when the encounter shifted. The camera caught a blur at the edge of frame. More figures stepping out of the ditch, as if the night had been holding them. First 2, then 3 more, silent, methodical, encircling. Collins' camera spun as he turned, capturing the highway now peppered with silhouettes. Some were half-lit by the cruiser's red and blue strobes, others just shadows moving against deeper shadows. Ramirez's voice barked commands, but even he sounded different now. Louder, yes, but with the edge of someone realizing the rules of control no longer applied. The footage became chaos. Flashlights swung wildly. One figure lunged forward. You could hear Ramirez grunt, the scuffle breaking out just inches from the lens. Collins' cam caught the sudden flare of his taser, the click and crack of electricity. But it only hit empty air. The hooded figure had moved with a speed that didn't match the human rhythm of the footage. The struggle intensified. Gravel skidded under boots. Radios crackled with static instead of dispatch. A body cam tilted sideways as Collins stumbled, the world going diagonal. His camera recorded Ramirez locked in close combat, arms straining, his voice barking. "Back up! Back up!" But the figures didn't retreat. They pressed in, multiplying. At one point, the footage showed something unforgettable. Collins' cam, half buried in gravel, caught an angle of the cruiser lights reflecting off something metallic in one of the figures' hands. Not a weapon recognizable by standard forms, but something curved, carved. Investigators froze the frame dozens of times, unable to identify it with certainty. The last clear moments before the cams went haywire showed both officers being dragged toward the edge of the road. Not stumbling, dragged. Their shouts turned desperate, overlapping commands with gasps for breath. Collins screamed for backup, but the radio spat nothing but garbled static, as if the frequency had been swallowed by the night. The footage ended abruptly. One cam blinked out mid-frame, the other recording only sky, a dark canvas dotted with stars, before cutting to black. Later, when locals whispered about it in diners, they used hushed tones. "They weren't just jumped," one man said, staring into his coffee. His friend replied, "No, it was like they'd been hunted." And for investigators, the tape wasn't just horrifying. It was baffling. Because for all the violence and numbers, there was no trace left on that road. No tire marks, no blood, no prints. Just an abandoned cruiser, doors still open, engine still idling, as if its occupants had simply vanished into the dark. The haunting echo. When the body cam footage finally surfaced, the Texas Rangers sat in silence around the playback room. The projector hummed faintly, throwing jittering frames of Collins and Ramirez across the wall. No one spoke, because honestly, what was there to say? The video didn't look like evidence from a traffic stop gone wrong. It looked like something that never should have been real. The official report, drafted weeks later, was clinical. Unidentified individuals, unknown weapons, officers subdued under mysterious circumstances. But the truth was rawer than that. Every officer in that room had felt the same cold weight in their stomach watching the clips. They'd seen plenty of violence, but never violence that seemed so organized. And never with that eerie silence, that ritual-like control. Investigators combed the stretch of highway where the disappearance occurred. Fresh teams were sent out with dogs, drones, even ground-penetrating radar. Nothing. The cruiser was parked like it had been left in a hurry, engine humming, headlights painting the shoulder. Inside were untouched donuts, half-drunk coffee, and a ticket book open to a blank page. No fingerprints beyond the officer's own. The townsfolk, though, they weren't so quick to keep quiet. Gossip brewed like wildfire. In diners and gas stations, people whispered theories. Some swore the footage showed cult folk, backwoods groups known to practice rituals in abandoned barns. Others muttered about cartels, strange traffickers who used the empty roads as hunting ground. One old rancher, shaking his head over pie and coffee, told a deputy, "Son, those weren't people. They were waiting for them. That's something else you're dealing with." Ramirez's widow held press conferences, her voice cracking, demanding answers. Collins' brother showed up to town hall meetings, red-eyed, slamming his fist on tables. They wanted closure. Instead, they were handed theories and cold reassurances that everything possible was being done. But deep down, they knew the truth. Nobody had a grip on what had really happened. The footage was locked away from public release, officially, to protect the integrity of the investigation. Unofficially, it was because no one wanted the public to see what law enforcement itself couldn't explain. But secrets don't stay buried long. A small piece of the audio leaked to local media. The static, the distant chanting, Collins shouting for backup before being cut off. It played once on a late-night radio broadcast before being yanked. That 30-second clip was enough to ignite fear across the county. Some locals claimed to see strange gatherings along the back roads in the months after. Farmers reported lights in their fields at odd hours, shapes moving along fence lines. Patrols doubled, then tripled, but no arrests were made, no explanations offered. Within the department, morale took a hit. Some deputies flat-out refused to drive that stretch of highway at night. A few even quit, moving their families out of state, saying they weren't about to tempt fate. One rookie, overheard in the locker room, muttered, "Man, whatever's out there doesn't care about a badge." His partner shushed him quick, but the words stuck. The deeper they pushed, the stranger the details became. Phone towers in the area had blips, dead zones that lined up almost perfectly with the timeline of the footage. Radios that worked fine elsewhere sputtered and died along that mile stretch. Even wildlife tracking cameras set up later failed. Batteries drained faster than normal, memory cards corrupted. By year's end, the case had more red string on the board than answers in the file. But one fact gnawed at everyone. The last thing both cams showed was the officers being pulled away from the road, not toward it. Which meant, if the figures dragged them off, there should have been trails. Yet nothing. To the families, that meant something horrifying. The men hadn't just been killed. They'd been taken. For what? No one dared guess. And as one sergeant muttered under his breath while reviewing the file late one night, a comment another officer later repeated at the local bar, it wasn't an ambush. It was a hunt. The legacy of the missing. 5 years after Collins and Ramirez vanished, the body cam files were declassified in a quiet, almost reluctant move. Not because the case had been solved. Far from it. But because the families, the public, even some lawmakers had demanded transparency. Pressure built like a dam about to burst, and the department finally cracked. When the footage was shown to a closed-door committee, the reaction was the same as it had been in that first darkened room years earlier. Silence, broken only by nervous shifting and muttered curses. The video was sharp enough to see their fear, the way Ramirez's hand trembled on his flashlight, the way Collins' jaw clenched as the shadows drew closer. But what stood out most wasn't their fear. It was their professionalism. They held their ground, calling out commands, working as partners till the end. The public didn't get the raw video. Instead, a carefully edited version, 37 minutes long, was released with key visuals blurred, certain audio cut. But it didn't matter. Even in fragments, the reality was too heavy to ignore. The screams, the frantic movements, the moment the cams hit the ground, showing only a sliver of sky as muffled voices rose in the distance. That was enough. The footage spread like wildfire online. Millions watched, debated, speculated. Forums lit up with theories, from cults to cartels to things no one could explain. Some dismissed it as doctored. Others said it was the most chilling evidence of an unsolved crime in modern Texas history. But for the families, it wasn't about theories. It was about proof. Proof that their loved ones didn't just disappear. They fought to the last breath. Proof that something tangible, undeniable, was out there on that lonely stretch of highway. Ramirez's widow said during one interview, they didn't run. They didn't give up. They stood together. Her voice cracked, but her eyes were fierce. Collins' brother added, if they think this is going to scare people quiet, it's not. It's going to wake people up. And in a way it did. That section of highway became a place of remembrance. Drivers left flowers at mile marker 191, small crosses hammered into the dirt by strangers who had never met the men but felt connected through the story. The air around that stretch carried a different weight, like every motorist knew what had gone down there and kept their eyes on the rearview mirror just a little longer than usual. Inside the department, younger recruits were shown clips of the body cam as part of training, not for tactics, but for grit. This is what commitment looks like, instructors would say. Some couldn't stomach it. Others carried it like a badge of honor. As for the truth, it never came clean. The who behind those shadowy figures was never identified. No arrests, no confessions, no bodies recovered. Just an echo in the dark, caught forever on 2 cameras that kept recording long after their wearers were gone. But here's the thing. When tech teams went back to study the files years later, they found something strange. In the final frames, right as the cams were lifted, one figure's face glinted in the headlights. Not clearly, not enough for recognition, but enough to prove one thing. It wasn't a mask. It was human. That revelation cut deeper than any theory. Because if it was human, flesh and blood, then someone out there knew exactly what happened. Someone walked away from that road while 2 officers never did. And as Collins' brother once put it, sitting on his porch years after, voice low and heavy, they weren't taken by ghosts. They were taken by people. And people leave trails. What Collins and Ramirez recorded in those final minutes will forever remain one of the darkest chapters on that Texas highway. Their sacrifice raised more questions than answers and left behind a haunting reminder of how quickly the line between duty and danger can blur. If this story gripped you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned, because there are countless more mysteries still waiting to be uncovered.